Welcome to ILTV's Insider. I'm Aaron Porras, and today, all eyes in the Middle East are on Iran as the Donald Trump administration comes to a close and President-elect Joe Biden prepares for office, especially now following reports that Trump looked into a strike against Iran in early November, raising fears that he may still order some sort of action at the last minute before his term is up. So are Israeli and other Middle Eastern fears of a refreshed Iran justified? Joining us to discuss is Middle Eastern expert and former ambassador to the United States, Yoram Ettinger, and columnist for Newsweek and the editor of HistoryCentral.com, Mark Schulman. Gentlemen, thank you so much for being with us.
Pleasure.
All right, now let's start with Trump's reported look into striking at Iran, which reports from the New York Times later said that he did away with, that he did not follow through with. But what would be the consequences of the timing of such a strike, i.e., hitting Iran without properly beginning the transition of power first? Mark?
Probably a disaster on multiple levels, because number one, if you were to attack Iran, it's something you needed to plan many months in advance. It's not one of those things where you just one day out of the blue, tell the Sixth Fleet or the fleet in the Persian Gulf, send some missiles and attack. If you're going to do an attack on Iran, it has to be well thought out, well planned. And this is not something you can do in a day or an hour. I mean, you can if you have to, but generally speaking, you need to think this out and do it carefully. Number two, we would be the respondents, no doubt, if the United States attacked Iran. And, on the way out is not exactly the way you want anything to take place. Some argument could be made that, that would be Israel's dream, that the United States attacked Iran. That's a whole other question. But the reality is to do this, one moment attack, and then we're pulling out anyway. We're pulling out of Iraq. We're pulling out of Afghanistan. We pulled out of Syria, sort of. We're going to pull out of all sorts of places. But on the way out, we're going to strike and attack Iran. That just doesn't work. Not to mention, no American administration has ever done anything during this period between two administrations. When one administration a new administration has been elected and doesn't take office, I mean, they do things that are necessary, but never have they done something without coordination with the incoming administration.
You mean militarily or in general?
On any level, anything significant. Generally speaking, other than pardons and things of that nature, and small things, most administrations. Let's go back. Every administration in American history has tried to coordinate as much as possible. Maybe a little less Hoover and FDR. But generally speaking, there's been a coordination between the outgoing and incoming administration, certainly when it comes to national security issues, because there needs to be continuity of whatever action is taken.
Well, Ambassador, Ambassador, I want to move to you. Same question. What would the consequences of the timing of a strike be? And is Mark correct in that, it's pretty much unheard of to follow through with such a strike?
Well, it seems to me that the assessment should be not against prior presidential experience, but against the backdrop of reality in the Middle East. Is Iran today threatening series of moderate Arab, pro-American Arab regimes? Is the machete of the Ayatollahs already at the throat of the regimes in Saudi Arabia and Oman and Bahrain and the Emirates? Is it threatening the survival of the regimes in Egypt and Jordan, all of which could be reality? But the main thing is not the speculation, will there or won't there be an attack? The main thing is the potential difference between Biden's administration and a Trump administration policy on Iran. And it seems to me that once again, we have to go back to the backdrop of reality. It was a U.S. administration which provided a robust tailwind to the rise of the Ayatollahs because they dwelt upon wishful thinking and oversimplification, that the Ayatollahs were partners to negotiation, that the Ayatollahs wanted to have freedom and better life and enhanced trade balance, standard of living, etc. And it was a U.S. administration that in 2015 provided the Ayatollahs with $150 billion coffers in order to intensify their engagement in terrorism and the proliferation of ballistic missiles, by the way, all the way to South and Central America. Obviously, that was not the intention of the Obama-Biden administration, but that was the outcome of the 2015 agreement. And certainly the last 4 years, we witnessed pressure on Iran rather than embracing Iran, and that provided much security to every single pro-American Arab regime. Should the next administration return to the Obama-Biden policy, that would amount literally to stabbing the back of every single pro-American Arab regime. It would increase substantially the potential of more terrorism and more wars in the Middle East, with also global implications.
All right, well, let's talk a little bit about the JCPOA, because you just mentioned a couple things, including reality, Ambassador Ettinger. And really, right now, we have a large statement coming from the Israeli ambassador to the United States, Ron Dermer, talking about, in a joint statement with the UAE and Bahrain, saying that the Biden administration needs to recognize the realities on the ground and speak with their allies in the United States or in the Middle East before making any sort of changes in policy with respect to Iran or the JCPOA. Do you think that Biden will heed this warning?
Well, when one observes the slate of potential national security advisor, Secretary of State, Defense Secretary, one goes back to the same slate of people who were there during the Obama-Biden administration, most notably Tony Blinken, who has been with Biden since Biden's days in the Senate through the days of Obama-Biden administration. And that could mean, I'm not sure, but that could mean once again dwelling upon this wishful thinking that the Ayatollahs are partners to negotiation. The fact of life...
What you're going to have is not wishful thinking. You're going to have an administration that's actually going to make decisions in a normal sort of way. We've had an administration in Washington who has not had a national security process in place at all, can't make any decisions that make any sense, can't follow through on any strategy. Taking the United States out of the agreement might have made sense if there was an overall strategy involved, but since there is no overall strategy, believing that economic sanctions were going to bring the Iranians to heel, something that has never worked almost in the history of the world, except maybe in South Africa, was an absurd policy. Disconnecting the United States from all its allies in the world was an absurd policy. I'm not sure what Biden is going to do, but the first thing Biden is going to do is going to try to re-engage the rest of the world in some sort of plan to try to hold back the Iranians. Let's keep in mind that when Trump came to office, the Iranians had 102 kilograms of enriched uranium. Today, they have 2.5 tons of enriched uranium. The Trump plan has not worked because the Trump administration has been incapable of any sort of national security policy that makes any sense over a medium or long term. They make a decision, he decides something, and they all run around to try to figure out what to do about it. Well, now he's made a decision to pull out troops from all sorts of places. The Defense Administration is trying to figure out what to do, trying to hold back, trying to wait until Biden takes over so it doesn't happen.
Well,
so the reality is, I'm not...
But Mark, yeah, I mean, with respect to what you just mentioned, specifically with the JCPOA, you know, the opposite might be said today with respect to Biden rejoining the JCPOA. You know, without a plan, you might be in the same situation which many Americans
Absolutely.
and Israel was against in the first place.
Look, I don't believe he's going to rejoin the JCPOA without a plan. And the plan has to be, look, what is the major problem with the JCPOA? The major problem is it had a sunset clause. Mm-hmm. Sunset clause meaning that at the end of 10 years, the Iranians were allowed to start doing things they weren't allowed to do previously.
Which 5 years have already passed.
Exactly. Well, 4 years we just gave a giveaway. So, or 3 years, but it's a giveaway. So the reality is...
If I may interject, because I need to move on to another engagement in 2 minutes. If I may interject, the policy of the last 4 years was very, very orderly laid out. It has constrained tremendously the maneuverability of the Ayatollahs in the Persian Gulf, in the Middle East, throughout the world, all the way again to their bases, existing bases in South America and Central America, contrary to the policy of the previous 8 years, which expanded tremendously their maneuverability. The policy of the last 4 years was based on realization that the Ayatollahs are not partners to negotiation. Any policy which will aim at achieving another peace, another accord with the Ayatollahs, but a so-called better accord, ignores the fundamental vision of the Ayatollahs, which is based on fanatical, religious, megalomaniacal aim, which has been at the foundation of the Ayatollahs since they took over in January 1979, sadly, complement of the very, very flawed policy of then President Jimmy Carter, Secretary of State Cyrus Vance, National Security Zbigniew Brzezinski, policy which very much was very, very similar, sadly, to the policy of the Obama-Biden policy of the preceding 8 years.
Look, you have two options. You either negotiate or you go to war. There's nothing really in between when everything is said and done.
The two options are whether you tolerate existence of a regime which doesn't only aim but actively, realistically, to topple every single
and for that you need multilateral pressure. You need to build allies. Everything the Trump administration failed to do.
I need to take off in literally 30 seconds. What I'm saying is, at stake is the literally existence of the relatively moderate regime in Egypt, Jordan, Saudi Arabia, UAE, Bahrain, and the fact is that those regimes wanted a victory for the Trump administration. And the fact is that in Tehran, the Ayatollahs and the headquarters of the Muslim Brotherhood, they prayed for a Biden victory. That's a fact. Now, the question is, are the Ayatollahs so wrong in reading the domestic American reality or not? But again, with that, I apologize, but I have to depart for a prior engagement. Thank you very much for the opportunity to be interviewed here. Thank you.
Ambassador Eggenger, thank you very much for being with us. All right, so Mark, we are going to have to continue now without the ambassador, so I will, take up one of his last points, and that is that, the Ayatollahs have a certain ideology behind their negotiations and what they want to get out of the JCPOA, and that hasn't seemed to have changed. So, why go back to the JCPOA?
No question. Look, the basic idea of the JCPOA was this. We'll let you grow economically in return for the fact that you're going to stop your nuclear program. That was the basic deal. Now, of course, you can always make the argument that they never intended to keep their agreement, but that goes with any agreement you make. You need to take the old Reagan view, trust but verify. We can't trust, we can't trust them, but we have to verify what's going on. And at least as far as we've been able to understand, the agreement had one of the most intrusive verification programs that any sort of agreement ever had. But again,
there were side deals that were reported from the UN that were made outside of the JCPOA, which allowed Iran to control inspections.
I have no doubt there's violations possibly going on. There's no question about that. But again, I got back to the basic point. Mm-hmm. You have two choices. You can either use economic pressure to get to a deal, or you can use military force. Now, no one really wants to use military force, especially after the United States made the mistake of attacking Iraq without any real plan. No one in the United States supports an attack on Iran. We might be in favor of it, but we don't really want it either because we don't know where the consequences of that is going to take us. We're ready to do it if we have to, if there's no other choice, but that's not the direction Israel wants to go either. So the reality is you need to find a way of bringing them to the table, getting the best possible deal, getting the best possible verifications as you can, because you need to stop their nuclear program. And again, they want certain things, we want certain things. The problem with the Trump administration unilaterally withdrawing was the fact that when you do anything unilaterally, you lose power. And they lost power in the world by unilaterally doing it. And without any plan, they said economic sanctions. But again, economic sanctions have not worked. Yes, It's made life more difficult for the regime. But a regime that doesn't care about the welfare of its own people doesn't really care the fact that the bread is too expensive, because they're willing to shoot their own people, so they're not worried about a revolution.
Well, again, though, could economic sanctions maybe have more bite if there was more participation internationally? And
absolutely. I mean, the fact.
So is that possible with a Biden presidency, especially because again, what's coming from Tehran right now is the Ayatollahs are saying, and we have President Rouhani saying this, is that they want no preconditions and to come back to the deal, with no changes. So that doesn't really align with what you're saying.
That's their opening gambit. Okay, fine. Wouldn't you say that too if you were them? That's going to be their opening gambit. Why not?
Well, that was essentially but that was essentially their negotiating tactic in 2015. Is that they put their foot down and they said this is what we want, and that's more or less what they got from the Obama administration.
Well,
am I wrong?
No, there's a lot of changes from the beginning to the end. The reality was the negotiations. It's very difficult to negotiate against the people who have been negotiating for 2,000 years, and you send someone who doesn't have that experience. There's no question that the Iranians did a better job negotiating. But look. The world wants various things from a new Biden administration. The world wants the Biden administration to rejoin the climate accord. They want them to rejoin the WHO. They want more multilateralism on the part of the United States, all the things that Trump walked away from. The fact of the matter is the Biden administration is going to have leverage with the rest of the world. The rest of the world is going to want the Biden administration to succeed. It doesn't want a replay of Trump 2024. So, will there be enough? Will they be able to get enough countries on board? I don't know. Time will tell. But there's a chance with Biden to get the rest of the world on board, which there wasn't with Trump. And that's the reality. Look, the United States is a strong country, but unilaterally it can't bring any country to do what it wants. Those days are long gone. The United States is not a unilateral player in the world. And the reality of this is not 1948. In 2020, there's a China that's very strong. There's Russia that has a lot of influence. And there are other countries that have a lot of influence in the world. And the only way the United States can accomplish things is by working together with other countries.
All right, well, so let's...
Will the Biden team be able to do it?
Well,
I don't know.
So let's address maybe some of these partnerships, because President Trump, you may agree with how positive or negative this is, but President Trump helped broker 3 peace deals in the Middle East between Israel and Africa, between Israel and Arab Muslim states, 2 of which are in the Gulf, Qatar, the UAE, and Bahrain. Could re-entering the JCPOA or coming close or trying to bridge the gap with Iran endanger those new agreements, endanger
I don't agree.
the new ties?
There's no reason why that would do it. Those countries wanted to tie themselves with Israel for 2 reasons. One, economic. They wanted to tie into the startup nation, so to speak, and all the aura that's around that. Excuse me. And second of all, they wanted the defense ties to be more, clearer. The fact of the matter is, look, the United States has been withdrawing from the world. Will it continue under Biden? We don't know exactly how. Trump was certainly doing it. So the reality was they wanted to be tied with the strongest military force in the Middle East, which is us. That's not going to change. We're certainly not going to become a weaker military force. The same advantages exist. The same cyber advantage and all the advantages that we have today are going to exist tomorrow in the day one of the Biden administration. There is no reason why these countries will break ties or anything else. Now, the only thing that may be problematic is Biden may be less willing to sell F-35s to everybody who wants it. Now, we can look upon that both ways. I mean, the F-35s were an incentive for them to come to a peace agreement with us. On the other hand, some people think it endangers us, so that's a different story altogether. So that's the one thing that'll change. I don't think the Biden administration is willing to sell arms as readily as the Trump administration was, to use that as a bait, shall we say, for further agreements.
All right, well, again, I have to go back to a certain tenet that was left out maybe in the original JCPOA, specifically not addressing their malign activities in the region and not addressing the ICBMs, or intercontinental ballistic missile development, both of which have continued both before Trump pulled out of the JCPOA and, of course, after. So, how might that change now under a Biden administration, which arguably from Iran's perspective might be a little bit weaker than Trump?
Okay, so I think 2 things. First of all, I don't think it'll be weaker than Trump. I think, again, we get back to the fact that it'll have buy-in from other countries in the world, which is really important. If you don't have buy-in from other countries, you really can't do very much. Look, we have to understand one thing about any sort of deal with Iran. A deal is the art of what's possible, not what we'd like. Will it include changing their attitude to the fact that they support terrorism all over the place?
Well, is it worth it, though?
Maybe,
Because is it worth it to settle for a deal that really doesn't benefit you, just to say, hey, I made a deal?
Okay, here's the question. Does it benefit if we have a deal that absolutely stops their nuclear program?
But does it? Because, again, it has a sunset clause. We're talking about a new deal now.
Well, that's the question. I do not believe the Biden administration is going to I can be proven wrong, obviously. I'm not the Secretary of State of the Biden administration. But I do not believe the Biden administration is going to agree to rejoin the agreement that'll include a sunset clause, or at least a sunset clause. Maybe they'll put it out 25 years or something like that. But it will not rejoin an agreement that sunsets in 5 years. That would make no sense. So I think this is a great opportunity to eliminate the sunset clause. And I think the sunset clause was the single biggest problem with the agreement. Again, people can cheat, but there was awfully strong enforcement in terms of cheating in this agreement. And so I believe that that's what's going to be. Biden will go negotiate some changes. The most important change is the sunset clause. Can we stop everything that the Iranians are doing that are wrong? Can we change the nature of their regime? Of course not. The nature of their regime is the nature of their regime. Only the Iranian people can change their regime. But what we can do is limit them. And look, the thing that threatens us is their development of nuclear weapons. And that's, yes, they have ballistic missiles, but if they can't put a nuclear warhead on them, I'm really not worried about a 500 kiloton, normal bomb exploding in Israel, because, first of all, we have various defense mechanisms to stop it. So the reality is, it would be great to stop everything, to change the nature of the regime. Of course it would be. But let's understand, we can only accomplish so much, and I think we need to try to accomplish the most. And what we have to do is put pressure from the Israeli perspective to make sure that if Biden rejoins the agreement, he rejoins the agreement only if the sunset clause is eliminated. And I think what we have to try to do is try to be positive and push in a particular direction. We can't say, no, we're going to fight you if you try to rejoin the agreement. We're going to get the Republicans to fight you. No, we have to take a positive approach. We need to say, okay, we understand there's flaws. Let's get the best deal we possibly can at the moment, because right now, the Iranians are going full speed ahead.
Well, I think at the very least, that's sort of the message from Ambassador to the United States, Ron Dermer, asking the Biden administration to come and sit down with us.
Agreement. I mean,
well, he said that he believed it would be a mistake, but he asked Biden, either way, to come and sit down and maybe move forward as a unified front. At any rate, Ron, Mark, that is unfortunately all the time that we have today. Thank you so much, Ambassador Ettinger, who's no longer with us, and Mark Schulman for joining us. And tune in next time on Insider for more in-depth analysis on everything Israel. Also, if there's a topic that you want us to cover next, please let us know in the comment sections online. Finally, remember that for more news from Israel, follow ILTV on Facebook, like us on Instagram, and subscribe to our YouTube and Roku TV channels. I'm Aaron Porras. Thank you for watching.